I stood frozen in the airport terminal, watching as my sister Amanda ushered her children into the first-class boarding lane. Right behind them were my parents, dressed in vacation clothes, smiling as they handed their boarding passes to the gate attendant. The same parents who told me last week they simply couldn't afford another ticket for their Hawaiian vacation. The same parents who suggested I save up for my own trip someday. I felt my stomach twist into knots as I watched my niece turn around and wave excitedly at someone behind me. I didn't confront them. I simply walked away, already planning what would happen next. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was always the responsible one. While most kids my age were out playing, I was the 10-year-old making sure the doors were locked at night because my parents were preoccupied with my younger sister Amanda. Our household operated on an unspoken but clear hierarchy. Amanda's needs first, then my parents', then mine, if anything was left over. "Ken, can you watch your sister while we run to the store?" my mom would ask, though it was never really a question. By 12, I was less a brother and more an unpaid babysitter. "Ken, we had to use your baseball money for Amanda's dance recital costume," my dad would explain. "There's always next year for baseball." Next year never seemed to come for me. But there was always money for Amanda's activities. I told myself this was normal, that all older siblings had to sacrifice. I believed this story for years, until I couldn't anymore. I put myself through state university by working 2 jobs while studying marketing. Amanda, 3 years younger, attended an expensive private college with our parents covering every expense. When I graduated with student loan debt that kept me awake at night, Amanda graduated debt-free with a car as her graduation present. "We wish we could help with those loans, Ken," my father said during a rare conversation about my finances. "But your mother and I need to think about retirement now." I nodded and changed the subject, swallowing the bitter taste of unfairness. What was the point of bringing it up again? The response was always the same: tight budgets, bad timing, or some other excuse that only seemed to apply to me. Despite everything, I maintained a relationship with my parents, and especially with my sister's children, my niece Lily and nephew Jake. They were innocent in all this, and I refused to let the complicated feelings I had about their mother affect how I treated them. When Amanda married Brad 5 years ago, I stood as a groomsman and gave a speech that made everyone cry happy tears. I kept the peace because that's what families do. Life had been looking up for me. At 29, I had finally landed a marketing position at a respectable firm in Boston. My student loans were under control, and I was building some savings. Then the economy shifted. Our firm lost 2 major clients, and suddenly they were cutting staff. "We have to let you go, Ken. Your work has been excellent, but we need to eliminate your entire department," my manager explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "You'll get 3 weeks severance." Just like that, I was back at square one. My emergency fund would cover about 2 months of expenses before I'd need to start making hard choices. I began applying for jobs immediately, but the market was flooded with qualified candidates just like me. It was during this stressful time that my parents announced their plans for a family vacation to Hawaii over the phone. "We thought it would be nice to take the grandkids somewhere special," my mother explained. "Amanda and Brad are bringing Lily and Jake. It's going to be such fun." I waited for them to invite me, but the invitation never came. Finally, I asked directly, "Would it be all right if I joined you all? I could use some family time right now." There was an uncomfortable pause before my father spoke. "Ken, we'd love to have you, but it's just not in our budget for another ticket. Hawaii is expensive, and we're already stretching to take Amanda's family." "I understand it's expensive," I replied. "I could contribute toward my ticket and accommodations. I wouldn't expect you to cover everything." Another pause. "It's not just the airfare, Ken. It's the hotel room, the meals, the activities. We've already made all the reservations for exactly 6 people. Adding another person now would mess everything up." I should have pushed back. Should have asked why they hadn't considered including me from the beginning. Instead, I said, "I get it. No worries. Have a great time." After hanging up, I stared at the wall of my small apartment, feeling that familiar ache of being an afterthought in my own family. But I accepted their explanation. Times were tight for everyone, and Hawaii was indeed expensive. If they were stretching to take Amanda's family, I couldn't expect them to stretch further for me. At least, that's what I believed, until that day at the airport. I'd received a physical letter confirming an upcoming job interview. Somehow, despite updating my address years ago, the company had mailed it to my parents' house instead of my apartment. My parents were leaving for Hawaii that afternoon, so I drove to the airport to catch them before their flight and collect the important document. As I approached the terminal, I texted my mom. "I'm at the airport to grab that letter. Where should I meet you?" Her reply came quickly. "So sorry, Ken. We're already through security. Can it wait until we get back next week?" I started to type a response when I looked up and saw them. Not past security at all, but standing in the check-in line for Hawaiian Airlines. All 6 of them with their luggage. My parents, Amanda, Brad, and the kids. I stepped behind a column, watching as they reached the counter. That's when I saw the agent placing 6 first-class boarding passes into my father's hand. My parents couldn't afford to bring me along, but they could afford first-class tickets for everyone else. First class to Hawaii for 6 people would cost well over $20,000. The realization hit me with physical force. I wasn't excluded because of money. I was excluded because they didn't want me there. As I watched them make their way towards security, my 7-year-old niece Lily bouncing with excitement, I felt something shift inside me. For 29 years, I'd accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I'd believed the excuses, swallowed the unfairness, and maintained the peace. Standing there in the airport, I made a decision. I would no longer accept being treated this way. But I wouldn't make a scene or confront them now. No, this required careful thought and planning. They would enjoy their first-class vacation to Hawaii, completely unaware that anything had changed. But everything had changed. For the next week, I went through the motions of my life, while my mind constantly returned to what I'd seen at the airport. I applied for jobs, took phone interviews, and even managed to secure an in-person interview for the following Monday. But beneath the surface, I was carefully considering my next steps. My parents had asked me to water their plants while they were away. I had agreed before the airport incident, and despite everything, I decided to follow through. Not out of obligation, but because it would give me an opportunity to look for answers. Their house was exactly as I remembered from my last visit 2 months ago. The familiar smell of my mother's cinnamon plug-ins, the ticking grandfather clock in the hallway, the photos on the walls. I noticed something I hadn't before about those photos. There were dozens of Amanda with her kids, Amanda's wedding. There were old family photos where I was present, but only 3 pictures of just me. My high school graduation, college graduation, and one from a family Christmas 5 years ago. I watered the plants methodically, moving from room to room. When I finished, I stood in the kitchen, debating with myself. Part of me felt I should just leave. That snooping would somehow make me the bad guy. But a stronger part needed answers. I started with the desk in my father's study, where he kept household records. The drawers were unlocked, which wasn't surprising. My parents had nothing to hide from me because they never expected me to look. In the top drawer, I found a folder labeled Hawaii 2023. Inside were printouts of first-class ticket confirmations, totaling $22,400. There was also a resort booking for 2 oceanfront suites at $480 per night each for 7 nights. The math was easy. $6,720 for accommodations alone. They couldn't afford my ticket, I whispered to myself, the lie even more glaring now with evidence in my hands. But what really made my hands shake was finding another folder labeled Monthly Expenses. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside was a meticulous record of my parents' regular payments. Among mortgage and utilities were items that made my blood boil. Amanda's car payment, $430. Lily and Jake's private school tuition, $2,100, divided by month. Amanda's credit card payment, $750. My sister was 36 years old, married to Brad, who had a successful career as an architect, and my parents were still supporting her financially. Meanwhile, I'd been working since I was 16, put myself through college, and struggled alone when times got tough. As I continued looking through the files, I found something that stopped me cold. A bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. It showed a balance of just over $180,000. This wasn't their retirement account, which I knew they kept with a different bank. This was something else entirely. I took photos of everything with my phone, careful to return each document exactly as I'd found it. As I was about to close the drawer, I noticed a small key taped to the back of the drawer. Curious, I removed it and looked around the office. It didn't take long to figure out it belonged to the small filing cabinet beside the bookshelf, which had always been locked for as long as I could remember. My heart pounded as I inserted the key. Inside were more financial documents, older ones dating back years. I found records of my college fund, a 529 plan my grandparents had established for me when I was born. According to the statements, it had grown to nearly $60,000 by the time I graduated high school. I had never seen a penny of it. I dug further and found withdrawal forms showing my parents had emptied the account in 2011, the year Amanda had her financial trouble after dropping out of graduate school. They had used my college fund to bail her out while I worked 2 jobs and took out loans for my own education. The betrayal was so complete, so perfect in its cruelty, that I felt physically ill. I sat in my father's office chair, holding these papers, trying to make sense of a lifetime of lies. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. "Hi, Ken. Just checking that you remembered to water the plants. Everything okay at home?" I stared at the casual message. They were in Hawaii, enjoying their luxury vacation, completely unconcerned about the fact that they had systematically favored my sister at my expense for my entire life. I took a deep breath and replied, "All good. Plants are watered. Hope you're having fun." Then I carefully replaced every document, locked the cabinet, and returned the key to its hiding place. As I drove home, a plan began to form in my mind. But first, I needed more information. The next day, I called my Uncle Steve, my father's brother. We weren't especially close, but he had always been kind to me. "Ken, good to hear from you," he said warmly. "What's up, nephew?" "Just checking in," I said casually. "Mom and Dad are in Hawaii with Amanda and the kids." "Oh yeah, your dad mentioned that trip. Sounded pretty fancy. First class all the way, from what he told me." Uncle Steve paused. "Weren't you going with them?" "They said they couldn't afford another ticket," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an uncomfortable silence. "That doesn't sound right," he finally said. "Your parents are doing very well financially. Your dad was just telling me about some investment that paid off big last year." "Really? They've always been pretty private about money with me." Uncle Steve snorted. "Private? Your dad brags about their portfolio every chance he gets. After your grandmother passed and left them that inheritance, they've been sitting pretty." I nearly dropped the phone. "Inheritance? From Grandma Jean?" "Yeah, about 5 years ago. She left money to both your dad and me. My share was $100,000, and I'm pretty sure your dad got the same." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. 5 years ago, when I was struggling to make my student loan payments, when I had to move to a cheaper apartment because I couldn't afford my rent, my parents had received a $100,000 inheritance they never mentioned. The next day, I met with my friend Zach, who worked as a financial advisor. "I need to ask you something hypothetical," I began after we'd gotten coffee. "If parents set up a college fund for their child, then used that money for something else without the child's knowledge, is that legal?" Zach's eyebrows shot up. "Depends on how the fund was structured. Was it a 529 plan?" "Yes." "And the child? Was the named beneficiary?" "Also yes." Zach leaned forward. "Then, no, that's not legal. The money in a 529 can only be used for qualified education expenses for the named beneficiary. Using it for anything else triggers penalties and potentially legal issues." He studied my face. "Ken, are we talking about your parents here?" I nodded slowly. "I just found out they used my college fund to bail my sister out of debt. Meanwhile, I'm still paying off student loans." "That's messed up," Zach said, "and it might be worth talking to a lawyer about." "There's more," I said, and told him everything from the airport incident to what I discovered in my parents' house. "Look, I'm not a family therapist. Zach said when I'd finished. But as your friend and as someone who knows about finances, what they've done is wrong on multiple levels. The college fund thing might even be illegal, depending on the specifics. But the bigger issue is the pattern of behavior. What would you do? I asked. Document everything. Get copies of all the relevant financial records. Then decide if you want to address this legally, personally, or both. As I drove home from meeting Zach, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Every year when I filed my taxes, I'd been confused by something my parents said. Remember, we're claiming you as a dependent. My father would remind me well into my 20s. But I don't live with you, and you don't support me financially, I'd point out. It's better for the family this way, he'd insist. We get a better return and we can help you more in other ways. Those other ways had never materialized. And now I wondered if they'd been fraudulently claiming me as a dependent all these years, getting tax benefits while providing me no support. That evening, I received a text from my mother with a photo of all of them on the beach in Hawaii. "Wish you were here," the message read, adding insult to injury. I responded with, "The resort looks beautiful. Must have cost a fortune for all those rooms." There was a long pause before her reply. "We got a great deal through your father's work connections." Another lie. I knew exactly what they'd paid from the documents I'd seen. "That's fantastic," I wrote back. "Maybe next time I can join if you find a deal like that again." "Of course, sweetie. That would be nice." I set my phone down, a cold determination settling over me. There would be a reckoning when they returned. But first, I needed to gather every piece of evidence and prepare myself for the confrontation that was long overdue. The more I dug, the worse it got. I spent the next few days reaching out to family members and family friends, carefully framing my questions to avoid suspicion. Each conversation revealed new layers of deception. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, seemed genuinely surprised when I mentioned my financial struggles. "But your parents are so generous with money," she said. "Just last year they paid for that luxury cruise for your sister's anniversary." I hadn't known about any cruise. "They are generous," I agreed, letting her continue. "And the trust fund they set up for Lily and Jake, that was such a wonderful thing to do, making sure their education is taken care of." "My sister's children had a trust fund?" I managed to keep my voice steady as I asked. "How much did they put aside for the kids?" "I'm not sure exactly, but your mother mentioned something about $50,000 each. Said they wanted to do the same as they did for you and Amanda." There had never been any trust fund for me. Not a penny. My conversation with my mother's best friend Carol was equally revealing. "Your parents were so proud when they paid off Amanda's student loans last year," she said casually during our call. "Such a weight off her shoulders with the kids and everything." They had paid off Amanda's student loans completely, while watching me struggle with mine for years. Even more disturbing was my discussion with Brad, Amanda's husband, when I managed to get him alone on a phone call while he stepped away from the family on vacation to take care of some work matters. "Hey, Brad. Quick question, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position," I began. "But do my parents help you guys out financially on a regular basis?" There was a long pause. "Ken, I'm not comfortable talking about this. I understand. It's just that I'm trying to figure out some family dynamics, and I could use some straight answers for once." Brad sighed heavily. "Look, I've always thought the way your parents treat you versus Amanda is unfair. I've said as much to Amanda, but she just gets defensive. Your parents pay for a lot of our expenses, yes. The kids' private school, Amanda's car, they even give her a monthly allowance for shopping." He lowered his voice. "I've tried to refuse, to tell them we can manage on our own, but Amanda and your parents insist. It's caused some tension in our marriage, to be honest." After thanking him for his candor, I hung up, feeling a strange mix of validation and renewed anger. Even Amanda's husband recognized the unfairness. My investigative efforts took an unexpected turn when I checked my mail and found a letter from the IRS. It was a notice about a discrepancy in my tax return from 2 years ago. The IRS was questioning my filing status because someone else had claimed me as a dependent. My parents. They were still claiming me as a dependent on their taxes, despite me being a fully independent adult, living on my own, paying my own bills. This wasn't just unfair, it was tax fraud. As the pieces came together, I realized this wasn't just about a vacation or a college fund. This was about a lifetime of systematic financial abuse and favoritism. My parents had deliberately enriched my sister and her family at my expense, while maintaining the fiction that they were struggling financially whenever I needed help. The day before my parents were due to return from Hawaii, I made one final visit to their house, ostensibly to check on the plants again. This time, I knew exactly what I was looking for. In the back of my grandmother's old Bible, which my father had kept after her death, I found an envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to me from my grandmother, dated shortly before her death 5 years ago. "My dearest Ken," it began. "I've always seen how hard you work and how little recognition you receive. I want you to know that I've left you $20,000 in my will. It's not much, but I hope it helps ease your burdens. You deserve every happiness, my beloved grandson." $20,000. Money I had never received, never even known about. Money that had likely been funneled to Amanda like everything else. I took photos of the letter and carefully returned it to its hiding place. Then, sitting at my father's desk, I wrote out a complete timeline of everything I'd discovered. The college fund, the inheritance, the tax fraud, the ongoing financial support of my sister, the trust funds for her children but not for me, the first-class vacation I wasn't invited to join. Looking at it all laid out chronologically made the pattern undeniable. This wasn't a series of isolated incidents or oversights. This was a deliberate, long-term pattern of favoritism and financial abuse. As I drove home that evening, I received another text from my mother. "Heading home tomorrow. Would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow night? We brought you a little souvenir." A little souvenir. After everything I'd discovered, the token gesture felt like another slap in the face. "I'd love to," I replied. "I have some things I'd like to discuss with everyone." "Wonderful. See you at 6. They had no idea what was coming. Their Hawaiian vacation smiles wouldn't last long. The day my family returned from Hawaii, I called in sick to my new job. I'd only been there 3 days, having landed the position I'd interviewed for the previous week. But I needed the day to prepare myself mentally for what was to come. I sat at my kitchen table with all my evidence spread out before me. Photos of financial documents, written statements from relatives, the IRS letter, my own detailed accounts of financial disparities over the years, and notes from my conversation with Zach about the legality of misappropriating 529 funds. While organizing everything into a coherent presentation, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Ken Lawson?" a professional female voice asked. "Yes, this is Ken." "Mr. Lawson, my name is Diana Mercer. I'm an attorney with Blackwell and Associates. I understand you may have some questions regarding potential financial impropriety involving a college fund." I was momentarily speechless. "How did you know about that?" "Your friend Zachary Wilson referred you. He mentioned you might need legal counsel but might be hesitant to reach out directly. He asked if I'd be willing to make the first contact." Zach. I made a mental note to thank him later. "Yes, I discovered my parents misappropriated my college fund and potentially committed tax fraud by claiming me as a dependent well into my adulthood. I'm still gathering evidence before deciding how to proceed." "Those are serious allegations," Diana said. "If you'd like to come in for a consultation, I'd be happy to review what you've found and discuss your options. There's no obligation to pursue legal action." We scheduled an appointment for the following week. Having a lawyer in my corner made me feel more confident about confronting my family. As evening approached, I carefully selected my outfit for dinner, a professional button-down shirt and slacks, clothes that made me look composed and serious. I packed all my evidence into a portfolio and drove to my parents' house, arriving exactly at 6. My sister's car was already in the driveway. I took a deep breath, grabbed my portfolio, and walked to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my niece Lily. "Uncle Ken," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around my waist. "We went to Hawaii and saw dolphins and volcanoes, and I got to drink from a coconut. Despite everything, I genuinely loved my niece and nephew. They were innocent in all this." I hugged her back. "That sounds amazing, Lily. I want to hear all about it." Inside, The house was filled with the aroma of my mother's roast chicken, my father's favorite welcome-home meal. In the living room, my father and Brad were discussing the golf courses in Hawaii, while my mother and Amanda arranged souvenirs on the coffee table. My nephew Jake was playing a game on a brand-new iPad that I presumed was a vacation gift. "Ken," my mother exclaimed, coming over to hug me. "So good to see you. Come look at what we brought you." She led me to the coffee table where, among various expensive-looking gifts for everyone else, was a small shell necklace on a cheap string. The price disparity was so obvious it was almost comical. "It's from a local artisan," my mother explained. "We thought it would look nice with your blue shirts." "Thank you," I said neutrally, making no move to pick it up. Dinner proceeded with my family sharing stories about their luxury vacation. The helicopter tour over volcanoes, swimming with manta rays, the luau at their resort, the spa treatments. I remained quiet, eating little, observing the dynamic I'd been blind to for so many years. "Ken, you're awfully quiet," my father finally noted. "Everything okay with the new job?" "The job is fine," I replied. "I've just had a lot on my mind lately." "Anything we can help with?" he asked, the irony of his offer not lost on me. "Actually, yes. I've been reviewing my finances and noticed some discrepancies I thought you might be able to explain." A brief look passed between my parents. Something like alarm, quickly masked. "Financial discrepancies?" my mother echoed. "What do you mean?" "Well, for starters, I received a letter from the IRS questioning my filing status because someone claimed me as a dependent. Would you know anything about that?" My father cleared his throat. "It's probably just a clerical error. You know how the IRS can be." "That's interesting, because they specifically said it's happened several years in a row. Clerical errors don't usually repeat like that." The atmosphere in the room had shifted. Amanda was looking between me and our parents with narrowed eyes. "Ken, is this really dinner conversation?" my mother asked. "The children are present." "You're right," I agreed. "Lily, Jake, why don't you go watch TV in the den for a while? The adults need to talk." Once the children had left, I opened my portfolio and placed the IRS letter on the table. "This isn't just about taxes, though. I've been discovering quite a lot recently about our family finances." "Ken, what exactly are you getting at?" my father demanded, his friendly demeanor evaporating. "I'm getting at the systematic financial favoritism you've shown Amanda at my expense for my entire life," I said evenly. "The college fund that was used to bail her out instead of paying for my education. The inheritance from Grandma Jean that I never received. The trust funds for Lily and Jake when I've struggled financially for years. And most recently, the first-class Hawaii vacation I was told you couldn't afford to include me on." Amanda gasped. "You went through their financial records?" "Ken, that's invasion of privacy. I watered their plants and found evidence of a lifetime of lies," I corrected her. "And I've since verified everything with other family members." "You've been talking to the family about our finances?" my mother asked, aghast. I needed to confirm what I found. "Aunt Patricia told me about the cruise you paid for. Uncle Steve mentioned Grandma's inheritance. Brad confirmed you pay for private school and give Amanda a monthly allowance." Brad looked down at his plate, avoiding his wife's accusing stare. "You had no right," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you had no right to drain my college fund to pay for Amanda's mistakes," I countered, placing the 529 documents on the table. "That's not just unfair, Dad. According to the financial advisor I spoke with, it's illegal." My mother's face had gone pale. "Ken, you're blowing this out of proportion. We've always tried to treat you and Amanda equally." I laughed without humor. "Equally? Let's look at the numbers, shall we?" I pulled out my detailed accounting of the financial disparities. Amanda's education, fully paid for. Mine. Student loans I'm still paying off. Amanda's car, paid for by you. My car, bought with my own money. Amanda's children, trust funds worth $50,000 each. Me, nothing. "Our financial decisions are none of your business," my father insisted. "They became my business when you stole from me," I replied. "The college fund from my grandparents was in my name. The $20,000 Grandma Jean left specifically to me in her will that I never received, that was my money. The tax benefits you received by fraudulently claiming me as a dependent? That affected my tax liability. My parents exchanged worried glances. They hadn't known I'd found the letter from my grandmother. What exactly do you want, Ken? My father finally asked. First, acknowledgement. I want you to admit to the favoritism and financial manipulation. Second, restitution. The college fund, the inheritance, and compensation for the years of tax fraud. And third, change. This pattern stops now. Or what? Amanda interjected. Are you threatening Mom and Dad? I'm giving them an opportunity to make this right before I involve my lawyer, I said calmly. The word lawyer had the desired effect. My father's face reddened while my mother began to wring her hands. You've already spoken to a lawyer? She asked, her voice trembling. I have a consultation scheduled next week. I'm prepared to pursue this legally if necessary, but I'd prefer to resolve it as a family. My father stood up abruptly. I think you should leave. We're not discussing this further tonight. I gathered my documents calmly. That's fine. Take some time to think about it. But understand that I'm not letting this go. Not this time. As I walked to the door, Brad surprisingly followed me. Ken, he said quietly, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. This has gone on too long. I nodded in appreciation of his support, then walked to my car. As I drove away, I felt neither triumphant nor defeated, just resolute. The first confrontation was over, but the battle for fairness had just begun. The week following my confrontation with my family was tense. My parents attempted to call several times, but I let the calls go to voicemail, wanting them to stew in the reality of what they'd done rather than allowing them to make excuses or manipulate me emotionally. My sister Amanda, however, was less willing to be ignored. 3 days after the dinner, she showed up at my apartment, unannounced. We need to talk, she said when I opened the door, pushing past me into my living room. Come in. Why don't you? I muttered, closing the door behind her. Amanda paced my small living room, looking around with barely disguised disdain. So this is where you live. Not all of us have parents funding our lifestyle, I replied evenly. She turned to face me. That's exactly what I came to talk about. This vendetta you're on against Mom and Dad. It needs to stop. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. It's not a vendetta, Amanda. It's accountability. They're devastated, Ken. Mom's been crying for days. Dad can barely sleep. Is that what you wanted? What I want is for them to acknowledge what they've done and make it right. Amanda threw up her hands. So they helped me out financially, more than they helped you. That's what parents do. They give each child what they need. I needed more help. Did you? I challenged. Or did you just expect more? Take more. You went to a more expensive college by choice. You chose to quit graduate school halfway through. You chose to buy a house you couldn't really afford. And our parents enabled all of it at my expense. Not everything is about you, Ken. That's rich, coming from the person who's had everything handed to her. Amanda's face flushed with anger. You have no idea what my life is like. Yes, Mom and Dad help us financially, but that comes with strings. They're constantly involved in our decisions, telling us how to raise the kids, where to go on vacation, even what car I should drive. You've had freedom to struggle, freedom to work 2 jobs during college, freedom to worry about making rent. What a privilege, I said sarcastically. Amanda sat heavily on my couch. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came to warn you. Warn me about what? Dad's furious about the lawyer thing. He's talking about cutting you off completely if you pursue this. No inheritance, no family connection, nothing. I laughed without humor. Cut me off from what? The support I've never received? The inheritance they'll probably give to you anyway? I'm already on my own, Amanda. Have been for years. He's serious, Ken. And he's not just talking about money. He's talking about cutting you off from the family, from Lily and Jake. That hit harder than I expected. My niece and nephew were important to me, and the thought of losing my relationship with them was painful. But I wasn't going to be manipulated. That's his choice, I said finally. But I'm not backing down. What they did was wrong, and you know it. Amanda looked away. It's more complicated than you think. Then explain it to me. Why have they always favored you? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. They never said it outright. It was just always the way things were. She looked up at me. For what it's worth, I never asked them to treat you differently. But you accepted it, benefited from it, never once stood up for me. I was a kid, Ken. By the time I was old enough to really understand what was happening, the pattern was set. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a while. Brad supports you, you know, Amanda finally said. We had a huge fight about it after you left the other night. He says he's always felt uncomfortable with how Mom and Dad favor me and the kids. He told me as much. She nodded slowly. I should go. But think about what I said. Are you really willing to lose your family over money? This isn't just about money, Amanda. It's about a lifetime of being treated as less than. And if they're willing to cut me off for simply asking to be treated fairly, then maybe they're not the family I thought they were. After Amanda left, I received a text from my father. We need to discuss your accusations in person. Come to the house tomorrow at 7 p.m. Just you and your mother and me. I considered declining, but decided it was time to hear what they had to say. I'll be there, I replied. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house to find them sitting stiffly in the living room, looking like they were preparing for a business negotiation rather than a family discussion. Ken, sit down, my father said, gesturing to the chair across from them. We've been discussing your concerns, and we want to clear the air. I sat, saying nothing, waiting for them to continue. First, my mother began, we want you to know that we love you very much. Everything we've done has been with the best intentions, including draining my college fund, tax fraud, hiding my inheritance. My father's jaw tightened. As your parents, we had to make difficult decisions about family resources. Yes, we used your college fund to help your sister. She was in a desperate situation, while I was working 2 jobs to pay for school. You were always more capable than Amanda, my mother said, as if this explained everything. More independent. You didn't need our help the way she did. So I was punished for being responsible, I said flatly. It wasn't punishment, my father insisted. It was recognition of your different personalities and needs. And the tax fraud? I pressed. Claiming me as a dependent when I was supporting myself? My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was a mistake. We should have stopped claiming you earlier. And Grandma Jean's inheritance to me? My parents exchanged glances. We needed that money for family expenses, my mother said vaguely. Expenses like Amanda's cruise? Lily and Jake's trust funds? My father leaned forward. Ken, what exactly do you want from us? Money? Is that it? We can discuss some financial support if you're struggling. I'm not struggling anymore, I said. I have a good job now. What I want is acknowledgement of the unfairness and restitution for what was rightfully mine. The college fund, the inheritance, compensation for the tax issues. And if we refuse? My father asked, his voice hard. Then I proceed with legal action. I have evidence of the 529 misappropriation, the inheritance diversion, and the tax fraud. My lawyer believes I have a strong case. You would sue your own parents? My mother gasped. You would steal from your own son? I countered. The room fell silent. There's something else you should know, my father finally said, his voice strangely subdued. Something that might help you understand why things have been the way they have. My mother reached for his hand. Frank, are you sure? He nodded grimly. Ken needs to know. He took a deep breath. Ken, you're adopted. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? We adopted you when you were 3 months old. Amanda is our biological child. I stared at them, unable to process what I was hearing. You're telling me I'm adopted? After 30 years? You're just now mentioning this? We meant to tell you when you were younger, my mother said, tears in her eyes. But the right time never seemed to come. And then it had been so long. So that's why, I said, the realization dawning. That's why you've always favored her. Because she's your real child and I'm not. You are our real child, my mother insisted. We chose you. But you've never treated me like I was equal to Amanda, I said, my voice hollow. All these years, I thought I was doing something wrong, that somehow I wasn't good enough. But it was just because I didn't share your DNA. It's more complicated than that, my father said defensively. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems pretty simple. You've spent 30 years showing me exactly how you feel about me versus your biological child. I stood up, needing to escape, to process this bombshell. I have to go. Ken, please, my mother pleaded. Let's talk about this. I can't right now. I need time. I walked out of their house in a daze, my mind reeling with the revelation. I was adopted. It explained so much, and yet it only deepened the hurt. They had chosen me, brought me into their family, and then spent my entire life making me feel like I didn't quite belong. As I drove home in a fog of confusion and pain, my phone rang. It was Brad. Ken, I heard what happened, he said when I answered. Amanda just told me what your parents revealed. Are you okay? Not really, I admitted. Did you know? No, I had no idea. Neither did Amanda until your parents told her after you left. He paused. For what it's worth, I think it's terrible they kept this from you, and used it as an excuse, conscious or not, to treat you differently. Thanks, Brad. Look, whatever happens with your parents, Lily and Jake adore their Uncle Ken. Amanda and I want you in their lives, regardless of how things play out with your parents. His words were a small comfort in the midst of my world being turned upside down. I appreciate that. After hanging up, I sat in my parked car outside my apartment, trying to make sense of my new reality. I was adopted. The knowledge shifted something fundamental in how I viewed myself and my place in the world. But it also strengthened my resolve. Being adopted didn't make me less deserving of fair treatment. If anything, my parents had an even greater responsibility to ensure I felt fully part of the family. Tomorrow, I would meet with the lawyer as planned. But now, I had even more questions that needed answers. The morning after learning I was adopted, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The revelation had been shocking, painful even, but it had also illuminated a lifetime of subtle and not so subtle differences in how I'd been treated. What had been a confusing pattern now made a terrible kind of sense. I called Diana Mercer, the attorney, and asked to move our appointment up. Thankfully, she had an opening that morning. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, professional but not intimidating. Diana herself was a woman in her 50s, with a direct gaze and an air of competence that was immediately reassuring. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, I said after we'd exchanged greetings. Not a problem. Your friend Zach indicated your situation was pressing. She gestured for me to sit. Why don't you tell me what's going on? I laid out everything: the financial favoritism, the misappropriated college fund, the inheritance I never received, the tax issues, and finally, the revelation that I was adopted. Diana took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. You've certainly been through a lot, Ken. From a legal perspective, there are several distinct issues here. The misuse of the 529 plan is particularly problematic if you were the named beneficiary. The tax fraud is a separate matter that would involve the IRS. And the inheritance from your grandmother, if you were specifically named in her will, would be another issue entirely. What about the adoption? I asked. Does that affect anything legally? In terms of inheritance and your legal standing as their child, no. Adopted children have the same legal rights as biological children. If anything, the fact that they've treated you differently because of your adoption status could potentially strengthen certain aspects of your case. She spent the next hour explaining my options, from formal legal action to mediation to various settlement approaches. By the end of our meeting, I had a clearer understanding of my position and a plan for moving forward. Before you take any irreversible steps, Diana advised as our meeting concluded, I'd suggest one more attempt at resolution with your parents. Now that everything is out in the open, they may be more willing to address the financial aspects without court involvement. I agreed to try once more and scheduled a follow-up appointment for the following week. On my drive back to work, I received a text from my sister. Family meeting at Mom and Dad's tonight at 7. Please come. Important. I texted back a simple, I'll be there, and continued to my office, wondering what new development awaited. The atmosphere at my parents' house that evening was tense, but not hostile. When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just my parents and Amanda, but also Brad, Uncle Steve, and Aunt Patricia. "What's going on?" I asked as I entered the living room. "We asked the family to join us," my father explained, "because what we have to discuss affects everyone, and we wanted witnesses to ensure transparency." My mother gestured for me to sit. "Ken, after you left yesterday, we did a lot of thinking and talking. About the adoption, about how we've treated you over the years, about the financial issues you raised. And?" I prompted when she paused. My father cleared his throat. "And we realized that you're right. There has been a pattern of favoritism toward Amanda and her family. It wasn't conscious on our part, at least not entirely, but looking back at the evidence you presented, it's undeniable. I hadn't expected this admission. Go on." "The truth is," my mother said, tears in her eyes, "we've struggled with our feelings about the adoption. Not because we don't love you, you are our son in every way that matters, but because we didn't handle the adoption well from the beginning. We kept it a secret when we should have been open. That secret created a distance that affected how we treated you. It doesn't excuse what we did with your college fund," my father added, "or the inheritance from your grandmother, or claiming you as a dependent inappropriately. Those were wrong, and we acknowledge that." Uncle Steve spoke up. "Your parents called me yesterday, Ken. They told me everything, including how they handled Mom's bequest to you. I was disappointed, to put it mildly. We were wrong," my mother said simply, "and we want to make it right." My father reached for a folder on the coffee table. "We've put together a proposal for restitution. The original amount of your college fund with appropriate interest. The inheritance from your grandmother, also with interest. Compensation for the tax issues. And an additional sum that represents what we believe would be fair given the years of imbalance." He handed me the folder. Inside was a document outlining a payment of $185,000, along with a formal acknowledgement of the financial improprieties. "We've also revised our will," my mother added, "to ensure that going forward, you and Amanda will be treated equally in terms of inheritance." I looked up from the document, surprised by the thoroughness of their response. "This is more than I expected." "It's what's right," my father said. "And there's something else." My mother reached for a small box on the side table and handed it to me. "These belong to your birth mother. The adoption agency gave them to us to give to you someday. We should have shared them with you years ago." With shaking hands, I opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver locket and a handwritten letter. I didn't read the letter immediately, knowing it was too personal for this moment, but I held the locket carefully, a tangible connection to the woman who had brought me into the world. "Thank you," I said quietly, pocketing both items for later. Amanda, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "I owe you an apology too, Ken. I benefited from the favoritism, and I never questioned it or stood up for you. I'm sorry." Brad put his arm around her shoulders supportively. "I appreciate that," I said, surprised by her sincerity. "There's one more thing," my father said. "We've been hiding behind excuses and half-truths for too long. The real reason we've struggled with the adoption isn't just that we kept it secret. It's that your birth mother was someone we knew." The room went completely still. "My birth mother? You knew her?" My parents exchanged glances before my mother continued. "She was my younger sister, Karen, your aunt. She was 19, unmarried, and not in a position to raise a child. We offered to adopt you privately. The revelation struck me like a thunderbolt. So I'm actually your nephew? Biologically?" My mother nodded, tears streaming now. "Yes. Karen made us promise not to tell anyone, including you, because she was scared and ashamed. She moved across the country afterward, and we rarely hear from her. But you've always been our son, Ken, not our nephew. So Amanda is actually my cousin," I said, trying to process this new information. "Biologically, Yes, my father confirmed. But legally and in every way that matters, your siblings. Aunt Patricia reached for my hand. I knew, Ken. I'm sorry I kept the secret too. Karen was always the black sheep of the family, and your mother was trying to protect her reputation. The room spun around me as I tried to absorb this final piece of the puzzle. All these years, my parents had been keeping this massive secret, allowing it to create a wedge in our family. Why tell me now? I asked finally. Because you deserve the truth, my father said. All of it. And because we can't truly make amends without being completely honest. We talked for hours that night, filling in gaps in my history, answering questions I'd never known to ask. There were tears, recriminations, and eventually, tentative steps toward understanding. By the time I left, I had a fuller picture of my identity and my place in the family than I'd ever had before. As I prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. We love you, Ken. We always have. We just lost our way in how we showed it. I know, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Their actions had been wrong, inexcusably so, but I could see now that they were trapped in a web of secrets and guilt of their own making. As I drove home, the locket and letter from my birth mother, my biological Aunt Karen, sitting heavy in my pocket, I felt something shifting inside me. The anger was still there, but alongside it was something else. The possibility of healing. The weeks following the family revelation were a time of profound adjustment. With the financial restitution from my parents, I was able to pay off my remaining student loans and establish a solid emergency fund. The relief of being debt-free was immediate and tangible, but the emotional healing would take longer. I met with Diana Mercer again, this time to review the settlement agreement my parents had proposed. She was impressed with its comprehensiveness. They're offering more than we likely would have gotten through court action, she noted. And without the emotional and financial cost of litigation, do you think I should accept it? From a legal perspective, absolutely. This addresses all the financial improprieties we discussed. But the decision is yours, Ken. You're the one who has to live with it. After careful consideration, I signed the agreement. Not just for the money, but for the acknowledgement it represented. My parents had finally taken responsibility for their actions, and that meant something. The letter from my birth mother, Karen, proved to be a bittersweet treasure. Written nearly 30 years ago, it expressed her love for the baby she couldn't keep, and her hope that I would have a good life with my adoptive parents, her sister and brother-in-law. I want you to know that giving you up wasn't about not wanting you, she had written. It was about wanting more for you than I could provide. I hope someday you'll understand and perhaps even forgive me. With my mother's help, I was able to locate Karen, now living in Oregon with a family of her own. Our first phone call was awkward, emotional, and healing all at once. I've thought about you every day for 30 years, she told me, her voice thick with tears. I always hoped you were happy. I had good moments and bad, I replied honestly. But I'm doing well now. Better than ever, actually. We agreed to meet in person soon. Another new relationship to navigate in my rapidly changing family landscape. The most surprising development came from Amanda. Once the initial shock wore off, she seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding our relationship on a more equal footing. I've been thinking about all those times growing up when I got what I wanted, and you didn't, she said during a lunch we shared about a month after the family meeting. I didn't see it then, but looking back, it was so obvious. I'm sorry, Ken. You were a kid, I reminded her. We both were. Still, I benefited from the imbalance, and as an adult, I could have questioned it more. She pushed her salad around her plate. Brad says he tried to point it out to me a few times over the years, but I didn't want to hear it. He mentioned that. She smiled wryly. He's a good man. Better than I deserve sometimes. He loves you. And the kids. At the mention of Lily and Jake, her expression softened. They've been asking about you. Would you like to come over for dinner this weekend? They miss their Uncle Ken. The invitation was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. I'd like that. My parents were working to make amends in their own way. Beyond the financial restitution, they made efforts to include me in family decisions and plans. When they began discussing a family trip for Christmas, they called me first. We're thinking about a ski trip to Colorado, my father said. All of us together. Our treat. That sounds nice, I replied, still getting used to this new attentiveness. We mean it, Ken, my mother added, clearly hearing the hesitation in my voice. We want you there, as an equal part of this family. My father cleared his throat. And we'd like you to help plan it. Whatever you think would make it a good trip for everyone. It was a small gesture, but telling. For the first time, they were actively seeking my input rather than presenting me with decisions already made. The most profound change, though, was within myself. Learning about my adoption and biological origins had initially shaken my sense of identity, but as I processed the information, I found it strangely freeing. The years of feeling like I didn't quite belong in my family hadn't been my imagination or my fault. There had been real barriers, constructed from secrets and unacknowledged biases. Now, with those barriers exposed and beginning to crumble, I could build relationships based on truth, rather than hidden resentments and unspoken expectations. 6 months after discovering my sister's children in first class on a flight I'd been told my parents couldn't afford, I used some of my restitution money to take a vacation of my own. Not to Hawaii, but to Oregon, to meet the woman who had given birth to me. Karen was shorter than I'd expected, with eyes the same shade of green as mine. She wept when we met, touching my face as if she couldn't quite believe I was real. You look like your grandfather, she said. My father. We spent 3 days together, filling in the blanks of each other's lives. She had 3 other children, making me a half-brother. They welcomed me with a curiosity and warmth that was overwhelming at times. Will you stay in touch? Karen asked as my visit drew to a close. Yes, I promised. This isn't a one-time thing for me. I'd like to know my siblings, if that's okay. Her smile was answer enough. When I returned home, I found an invitation waiting for me. My parents were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary and wanted to renew their vows with a small ceremony. We'd be honored if you would be your father's best man, the note read in my mother's handwriting. As I stood beside my father at the ceremony, watching him recommit himself to my mother, I realized how far we had all come. The family that had once been divided by secrets and favoritism was slowly healing, becoming something new and potentially stronger. At the reception afterward, my father pulled me aside, his expression unusually vulnerable. I'm proud of you, Ken, he said. Not just for forcing us to face the truth, but for giving us the chance to make things right. Not everyone would have done that. I'm not sure I had much choice, I admitted. But I'm glad it worked out this way. He nodded, understanding. Family is complicated, but it's worth fighting for. As I looked around at the gathering, my parents, Amanda and Brad with Lily and Jake, Uncle Steve and Aunt Patricia, and even Karen, who had flown in for the occasion, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. The journey hadn't been easy. It had required confrontation, painful truths, and the courage to demand better. But standing there, surrounded by the complicated, imperfect people who were my family, I knew that the struggle had been worth it. I had learned that true family isn't just about blood or legal ties. It's about honesty, fairness, and the willingness to acknowledge wrongs and work to right them. It's about seeing each person as they are and valuing them accordingly. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me, but by how I chose to stand up for myself. In demanding fairness, I had found not just financial restitution, but something far more valuable: self-respect, and a family that finally respected me too. Have you ever had to confront a painful family truth? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to stand up for what's right in your own life, no matter how difficult it might seem.